Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is David Bukes, once again here with Reverend David Peterson. Welcome this morning, Dave.
Thank you.
We're here to talk about lessons for Trinity 7 coming up, the gospel lesson from Mark chapter 8. And I'm going to begin by reading that from the New King James Version, and then we'll dive in. Mark chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. In those days, the multitude being very great, and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way. For some of them have come from afar. Then his disciples answered him, How can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? He asked them, How many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And they set them before the multitude. They also had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said to set them also before them. So they ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. Immediately got into the boat with his disciples, and came to the region of Dalmanutha. So my first question for you is, this is the feeding of the 4,000. Which would you rather preach on, the feeding of the 4,000 or the feeding of the 5,000?
Oh, the 4, this one for sure.
Why is that? That's a definitive answer.
Yeah, because this one's to the Gentiles. So I just think it has, I just think it's more interesting in that way. The expansion of the kingdom.
Yeah. So the features, it's striking. It's striking how the features play out in such a way that the expansion of the kingdom is so vivid. Have you investigated this business about the different kinds of baskets that are used in Mark 6 versus Mark 8?
Investigate's a bit of a strong word, but I have read what the dictionary says.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, these are bigger, right? These are supposed to hold 50 loaves of bread.
Yes, that's right. So the comparison is, this is the kind of basket that St. Paul was let down in when he was, in the walls of the city, right? So a big basket. Yeah.
And somehow Roman, which right, I can't remember now, but there's it's not a borrowed word, but I guess it has a connotation of the kind of baskets Gentiles would have. That's
Gotcha.
What I thought you were going to say. But
okay, I think I'm drawing a blank on what the word is here. Let me
spurda or something like that. It's
I think that there's some etymological connection to spero, as in like sowing a thing, like spreading a thing abroad, which also would be nice if that were the case. The internet doesn't always tell the truth, but that would be great if that was the case.
I mean, I have a bad habit of caring too much about etymology and then also making etymology up. So I'll think words are related. I mean, particularly in Greek, they seem to me related, and then they're not. So
yeah. That really highlights for me one of the real hazards in preaching, because it is so tempting to jump all over literary things that make a true point, right? It's a valid, legitimate point, but maybe exegetically really poorly grounded.
Yeah, I always think of, Luther, I think, does this at times. I'll tell you, the sainted Paul McCain, who was my frenemy, and I miss him terribly, he was really notorious for this. That was one of his weaknesses. Kind of an endearing characteristic, but he would bring any argument to bear to make his point in the heat of things. And Luther does that too. And I get it, but it's not a good practice, right? The sort of throwing spaghetti against the wall. but it is hard to resist.
Well, it is a reflection of the fact that we are prone to care only about winning an argument and not about the truth, right? That's in all of our hearts.
It is. Yeah. I think there is this just, and I wonder if Luther, I heard I didn't see this, but I heard Stecker did an interview with this guy that I'm really going to butcher this story. There's some evangelical that runs around doing YouTube videos of visiting churches, and he did a famous one with Bill Whedon about where he was just enamored with Lutheranism, and Whedon was there in his kind of insanity, with his great enthusiasm. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I've seen it a long time ago. I saw it.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Well, anyway, apparently Stecker talked to that guy and asked that guy, what's wrong? What do you think about the Missouri Synod? When you look at all these denominations, you've got so much exposure. What's unique or about the Missouri Synod? And the guy said, you are the most antagonistic to yourselves. You fight the most and you have the most venom internally. And I know. So I heard that just yesterday, actually. I haven't seen the interview, but I found that really sad, right? I mean, I think that's shameful. That's not something to be proud of. But I was wondering if there isn't something in our theological method that leads us to this. We are the denomination that comes out of disputations, right?
Yeah.
And there is I think disputations are great, and I don't want to do away with them at all. I mean, I think actually there's a strength in this way of doing theology, but at the same time, there is also a danger that it becomes some sort of a zero-sum game where we're just what you said, we're trying to win. And, the disputations ought to be more like, two friends, more Hegelian, I guess, where we're going to come to a thesis rather than there's going to be a winner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're reminding me of a book. I just read it like 2 days ago called Death by Meeting. You ever heard this book, Death by Meeting?
No.
It's a great provocative title, and he makes clear that he's not interested in doing away with meetings, but he's offering a critique by fable of the way that corporations run their meetings. And one of the keys that he claims is needed for successful meetings is conflict, but it has to be mediated conflict. And so that the chair of the meeting is responsible for mining for conflict and facilitating it in such a way that it is not, it's not personal and it's not antagonistic. And I wonder if that's part of our trouble, is that we fight like brothers when dad's not around, as opposed to like having a discussion that's aimed at the good, because we understand we're under moderation, and that we're actually on the same team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing with like marital instruction, right, or counseling. It makes all the difference in the world when there's another grown-up in the room and you can't act like a big baby. There's a kind of accountability. I wonder if I like that analogy, but let's take it one step further. Instead of fighting like brothers when dad's not around, it's fighting like brothers not only when dad's not around, but when there's a girl present. Right?
Yes.
Because I mean, that's really the kind of worst case, right? Where you're showing off and you're trying to, and what we need is, I like that. So I'm trying to think.
It's great. That's great, because the terrible irony is that you're at your worst when you're trying to impress a girl by beating up on your brother. There's nothing admirable about that.
But it's so typical, right? It's our own. I mean, it's our own experience and history, personally, and as fathers and as sons. So yeah, that's. Well, anyway, I like that. I don't know how we got into that, but you said something about winning. That was the problem. We're trying to win. We act like it's a zero-sum game. And our goal, I just actually preached this in a sermon. I think this is a problem. This becomes a kind of eighth commandment problem. And some of it's because, we need to think about life together in the church, not as a competition. I mean, there is a place for competition. It's sort of like your meeting thing. But, our goal is to kind of keep the game going, right? Not to end it, not to finish it. And so it's like there are some games. A football game has a time limit, and when the buzzer goes off, we see who has the most points. The game ends. But then there's other activities like playing Legos together, where you don't want it to end, and there's no winner in that sense, right?
Yeah, and I remember vividly these times playing sports when I was a kid. That because you love the game so much, you don't care about winning, and so you do things to perpetuate the game. You let the other guy have some more points, because you just want to keep playing.
I've been the beneficiary of that. I think I've done it sometimes too. But yeah, no, absolutely, that's right. Yeah.
So we got into this conversation because we were talking about weak exegesis that just kind of throws spaghetti at the wall. So Luther being at times an exemplar of that. So maybe this is our transition to Luther preaching on Mark chapter 8. What does Luther have for us today?
Yeah, it's a long sermon. He starts really with the temptation of the belly. So he looks at the miracle and he says this is an answer to being worried about food or temporal goods, right? But then he pretty much immediately goes into the office of the ministry, and the whole thing is about supporting the office of the ministry and not being greedy, and the danger of preachers if they're too poor or too rich. So that's really the gist of the first half, that the office of the ministry is necessary and we are required to support it, and there's sort of dangers in it. Then he says a few things along the way that I think are interesting and helpful. He makes a kind of Augustinian definition of miracles as being actually happening constantly. And then, so what he says is, every time you eat a loaf of bread, because God has provided it, and it's a miracle. This is just a special miracle. He doesn't say that God speeds up time, but he has this really interesting thing that food always comes from rocks. And did you read that? That was
I caught that. I caught that line. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really insightful. Right? Dirt is just little bitty rocks, and so God is just doing really the same thing. And the point of these special miracles is actually to draw our attention to the reality of God's providence all the time and recognizing, right? So here he feeds 4,000 people, but every day, all day long, he's feeding the whole world. It's kind of the way it goes. So,
and the kind of indictment against those who would be believers is that if you cannot trust your Savior to provide for your daily bread, then how could you possibly trust him to provide for your salvation?
Right. And why are you elevating the needs of your body so wrongly, right?
Yeah.
There is sort of, I was thinking about as I was reading this sort of Maslow's pyramid, maybe we need a Luther pyramid of the hierarchy of needs. And the first one would not be food and water. It'd be forgiveness, right? Fellowship with God. And, the other things are far less important and all fall into place in any case. So that's Luther.
What would be next? What would be next on his list?
That's a good question. I think I don't know. I mean, it depends on when you read it. Sometimes it would be actually family or community, right? Because he's so kind of focused. But I think other times it'd follow kind of the Maslow pyramid. I don't know. After that first one.
I'm thinking about his concern about pastors and poverty here, which when I didn't read the whole sermon, but when I read or scanned that section, I thought, man, that is timely. It is not at all anachronistic. But the point of that is congregation members have a vocation, a calling to care for their pastors, and so it's almost like he would turn Maslow's hierarchy on its head at some point, where he'd say it's not about what you need, but what you owe to your neighbor, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he does. Yeah. And he does expect tithing, which I always like to point out. He says in the Old Testament had been imposed and commanded through Moses that everyone should give a tenth of all their income. How much more should Christians do for that which is more necessary, right? So Yeah. Everyone should help promote God's kingdom and word with temporal bodily goods. So he certainly does have this emphasis that we ought to be caring for the church.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
for the ministry particularly. Then he I did like the end of this sermon better than the rest of it, where he gets a little allegorical. I always like that. So he does take the events of the parable and draw some lessons. First of all, the fact that Jesus gives thanks, and so he says we should always be thankful for whatever God gives, and we should kind of cultivate this thankfulness, and then it will always be a blessing. And then he secondly says that because Jesus commands the disciples to set the bread before people, he shows that he wants to give his work and gifts through the means and service of people. So very Luther-esque there, that God works through means. And he does have this nice, these set of German sayings that I'd never heard, but he has, going to church does not delay you. Giving alms does not impoverish you. Goods acquired unjustly do not increase. And the footnote, these are apparently kind of proverbial sayings. But I mean, at least the first two, I think, could really be they sound pretty good in English, right? Going to church is not a waste of time. It doesn't keep you from important things, right? Like sleeping, which we think is so important. And then giving alms does not impoverish you, right? So I thought that was good.
There's the strong biblical illustration about giving alms. The widow of Zarephath, who pours out what she has and ends up with an abundance. Do you think that you can make the same claim about your time? That when you give your time, when you devote your time, you have more than you need. you have an abundance.
Yeah, you ought to be. I never tried to, but I think we can do that. I have made that argument. I have said this about monetary gifts. I don't know why we wouldn't say it about others, right? That, you have these also, this isn't in the Bible, but, how many times does Luther have this sort of thing, where he's so overwhelmed with all of the things he has to get done that he goes and prays for 3 hours. And, that, and of course you see that in other, figures in church history too. So I think it makes sense that, but of course, just like with the money, that can be a spiritual fulfillment that, feels like, I think you could give, so much money to the pipe organ that it actually, at least theoretically, could be sort of financially consequential for your life, right? You can't go out to dinner the way you want it. You don't have as much disposable income. But I think we would say that probably this is still a blessing and an abundance because, in fact, your disposable income was a distraction and was teaching you to love the wrong things, right? So even if it's not a multiplication that can be accounted for in a checking book balance, it's still a multiplication. And the money that you have left becomes actually put to good use and is therefore spiritually beneficial because it's no longer an idol. So I wonder if you could do the same sort of thing with time. It might not be that all of a sudden, if you go to church more, you sleep less and you feel better. But it might be that you realize that you were using your time poorly and you were filling your mind with trivia at best and with things far worse than trivia, possibly, right?
Right, because of course, so much of what we do is on account of boredom. So much of the way we spend our time is because we imagine that we are bored, merely filling time, right?
Yeah. Which is so sad when you think about it. So this time thing is really interesting, maybe because I'm just getting old, but the reason that time goes by, right, the whole thing the days are long, but the years are quick, or however that goes. The problem is the reason that time goes quickly is because we aren't mindful, because we're not paying attention. And some of that happens because we become desensitized. There are things that we're used to doing. So, like a commute is the kind of classic example. If you drive a half hour to work every day and home, you'll get in the car and your brain shuts down completely and it's like no time passed at all, right? That is sad to me because that's 30 minutes that you wasted. You've just lost that time, and you've lost it forever. And we can you can slow time down. Time is subjective. You slow down time by being bored. And a lot of almost everything that's worthwhile is boring because it requires effort and attention when it's right. And that makes it, kind of difficult, painful at some level and boring, but you're actually then not wasting your life.
Yeah, that's great. I'm thinking about how, take again the widow of Zarephath. So I think the analogy holds. If she had said to herself, I am not going to, I'm afraid of losing this, the flour and the oil, and so I'm not going to pour it out. She would have had less than she had she poured it out. And there's something about that with the boredom. We imagine that there's this kind of foolishness about how we handle it and say, I need to fill this with things, even if they're completely vain and silly things. I need to fill this time with things, and the net result is that what would have otherwise been really, really fruitful is just completely spent, completely gone.
Yeah, completely gone. And that could have been time that you were actually with your wife, engaged with her, right? Or with your children or with other. And I think that ultimately is really that's really the thing that is the most valuable in the world are human beings. And so that's really where we should be making our investment. I'm so guilty of this. I love being alone. I say that as a person. I'm not widowed. That'll probably come back to haunt me if I'm widowed or something. But like my favorite thing about going to the gym is putting headphones in and nobody talking to me. And and that's terrible. It's really terrible.
I don't know, because there is this kind of balance, right? So when you professionally are involved in talking and listening, it does feel to me at times like I have a quota. I can only listen to and speak so many words, and after a Sunday morning, I feel like I've used them all up. I feel like I've gone through all of the words that I could say.
Yeah, except if you could have an actually really good conversation with somebody, it would energize you. Right?
That's true.
And
yeah.
So I think it's. There is a place for rest and there's a place for receiving and being ministered to and all those things. But I think a lot of times what we're doing is just retreating out of weakness. And I wish I was. I could. There's people I could talk to at the gym. It wouldn't be that painful or difficult, and it would maybe it would even lead to some things. Maybe I could even witness to them. Right?
Well, yeah, that's right, and that's a great caution. Missed opportunities there to share the gospel, and even if not that, just to afford human dignity to other people. I think so often about the kinds of interactions that I prefer when I'm in public, which is where we can do the pleasantries and the minor, like the small talk, and not do the heavy lifting. When what that is essentially saying is like, you're not worth my time and attention. Yeah. Whereas giving somebody time and attention is an incredible gift, and it bears abundant fruit, right? So even if for instance, whatever, they're like, you quote unquote don't get anything out of that conversation, nevertheless, you're still getting good. You're practicing, recognizing human beings as, made in the image of God and worthy of dignity, just as their Heavenly Father loves them. And I think, now you're indicting me, because I'm thinking about how little I want to do that. I want the circle to be so small where I can manage all the interactions and I don't have to, incorporate other people into my worldview. Right?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And there's also been quite a bit of, research evidence that it's actually good for your mental health to have conversations, on the bus or at the gym, with people, with strangers, that it actually, we were designed for this. So I think I don't think you have to be, witnessing to them explicitly all the time, but I think you're absolutely right that treating other people with actual dignity. And the funny thing is we would, to children, we would never treat children this way. If I'm at the gym and there's a child there and that child smiles to me and talks to me, says something to me, I'm taking my headphones out to talk to that child, right?
So what's the difference? Why is it obvious with children?
Because we know we have an obligation to them, and that they need kind of, I don't know. Or I don't know, or maybe they're just not a threat, or we think maybe they're going to be interesting.
I think that's probably it. One of the key differences that I see between children and adults is adults are threatening to us because, for one thing, we know what they're like, and we know that we're never honest. We're never straightforward with other people. Whereas children will just tell you exactly what they think, and that is incredibly disarming. It's wonderful, isn't it? Like if a kid comes up to you and tells you that, he saw the Spider-Man movie and now he wants to shoot webs out of his hands, it's the best thing in the world because you are seeing straight into this person's heart. And I think maybe that's part of it is, that there's some risk, some risk that this won't actually, that you'll be hurt by attempting to engage with somebody and they won't actually engage with you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're right on. Yeah. Because we don't treat children the way we treat adults. I mean, we're a little bit hesitant because you don't want to be creepy, but so we don't typically initiate things with children in public, but we certainly aren't going to ignore a child.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. So I don't know how we got off on that, but that happens.
Bread and time, and you were,
there we go.
Yeah, his reflections at the end of his sermon.
Yeah, and this idea. So he has this great thing too. Boy, what Luther, if he's watching, what he thinks of us. He really goes against the luxury stuff at the end of this. I don't know if you read that, but the third thing is he says that we have to use the abundance that God gives prudently. Based on the fact that they gather up the fragments. They're not wasted. And it's wrong to waste food, right? And he says it's hateful, disgraceful vice, great contempt for God's gifts, that the world is now completely flooded with excessive expenditures, luxuries, and throwing away money on all kinds of things. And boy, if that was true for Luther, man alive, is that right? I mean, I was thinking about the sort of rock stars smashing guitars. I've never really quite understood that. Right. Or rap stars with champagne, right? Doing this, like taking this $1,000 champagne and busting it on the stage or pouring it out or whatever. This to me is just shocking. And as a Midwest, it's gross. I mean, but those are, I mean, why would they do that? It is a kind of rebellion. And I mean, they're wasting it on purpose just to demonstrate they have so much that they don't care. And they have no respect for these luxuries, whether it's champagne or a guitar, right? There's no respect for the guitar. There's no love for it. It's really, I mean, that's an extreme example, but anyway, I think there's other things that go on.
I'm thinking about the contrast between our time and Luther's time, where I imagine that, we live in such affluence in America that everything is luxurious by comparison. And
Yes.
so the contrast between those who live in luxury and those who are impoverished isn't always so vivid before us. Take, for instance, the rich man and Lazarus. No, I don't know any Americans who have a Lazarus sitting outside their gate. There are some in some places. I know people who are, who have right outside their door, people who are completely impoverished. But the contrast is missing for us, and that makes it all the worse. It's like here we have such abundance and affluence, and it is. We don't even know it. we don't even recognize it. Yeah.
No.
Whereas, I imagine that for like Luther's description of shameless vice, it's kind of you can see the poor man outside your gate, and so you think to yourself, thank God I'm not like that guy, and I've got all of this stuff. It doesn't even occur to us, that
Right.
we've got all this stuff.
No, we're just, because of course, the more stuff we have, the more covetous we become, because the flesh is never satisfied. And it's always desiring a kind of maximalization of pleasure, and it's insatiable. And so you become desensitized so almost immediately. I always use this example of, it's so convenient to be able to warm up a cup of coffee in the microwave. It's amazing. And yet, it takes 30 seconds and it just feels like it's forever, right? When you think about what it took to warm up, first of all, even just to have coffee in the abundance that we have it, right? And good quality coffee. I always think of these Civil War guys, trying to make coffee out of tree bark and stuff. And, how desperate they were for a cup of coffee. And here we're drinking, this gourmet coffee, and it's so convenient and so easy, even 40 years ago, if your mom and dad had a pot of coffee and it got cold, they had to put it in a pot, put it on the stove, right? It was fussy. It took, 5-6 minutes. It's just, we put the cup in the microwave, push one button. It's crazy.
When you have a moment to take time to do it, and if there is something like you're on vacation, for instance, and so there's no external pressures. There's this, at least for me, there's this experience of the wholesomeness of that kind of the time that it takes to do things when I don't have anything else going on. But what you're revealing to me is that part of my impatience, part of my, the spite of the luxury that God has given me is that I worship. I'm follow the dictates of so many other things in my life that tell me I must do this, that, or the other thing, and so I feel pressed, like they're making demands on my time, and so I don't have time. I don't have time to make a proper cup of coffee. I need the microwave to do it for me right now because I need to satisfy these other demands that are being placed on me.
And I'm going to gulp it down without appreciating it anyway. I'm not going to say thank you before I drink the coffee.
Right.
We totally should, right? We should be, of course we should. It's, we're not going to taste it. It's just, all of it is really, it's because we've been desensitized. You offer these guys in the Civil War a cup of coffee. They would say thank you, right? They would appreciate it. And so I think that's that is the problem with the flesh, and the reason that we need more than ever, right? Fasting and, these other sorts of deliberate exercises. The world calls it mindfulness. I don't think that's a bad word, but that really is what the Bible means by simply contemplation and awareness, right?
Yeah, taking every thought captive to Christ Jesus. That's mindfulness.
Yeah. Being attentive and just recognizing the gifts that are all around us. So
we should pray in a different way then as well. 'Cause, we're quick to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." If we remember to pray, we ask God to provide our daily bread. But there's this beautiful prayer in Proverbs 30. I think about this all the time. Maybe you probably know it. 30. It's in verses 7-9. "Two things I ask of you: deny them not to me before I die. Remove far from me falsehood and lying." And then here's the key: "Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God." What a thing to ask for, just the right amount and not more.
That is Solomon at his best, right? The real encapsulating of the wisdom, I think. I love rules and I love to tell my members what to do. So I often have said we ought to try to say a prayer of thanks 100 times as often as we say a prayer of asking for something. And I don't really mean it quite that literally, but so every time that you ask for something, just to force yourself to at least say it, to just pause and think of things you're thankful for and express it. I think it's good for your mental health. I think it's good for faith, to sort of think in that way. I don't want to be legalistic about it, but, I think it's a good exercise. I think it's a good exercise. It's been a good exercise for me personally. Anecdotally, I have many of my members have latched onto that and have told me it's been helpful for them. So,
yeah, you get good at what you practice, and I'm thinking about how sometimes for a Christian it's not so much these things, both the vice and the virtue, they don't you don't see the payoff, in the day-to-day practice, but you will see it in a crisis or in a time of great jubilation, right? So imagine that you had not been in the practice of thanking God for the things that He's given you, and then He gives you, miraculously cures your disease or something like that. Your thanksgiving in that moment will be impoverished. You will probably thank God, but it will be impoverished because you haven't practiced. You haven't gotten good at thanking God. Meanwhile, on the other hand, if you are in the habit of not recognizing the good gifts God has given you, and then when they're taken away and you're in a moment of crisis, you won't know what to say to God because you haven't gotten good at acknowledging that they came from Him in the first place, and He's free to take them away if He pleases, right?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I like to often say, right, this is the military thing, but you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your training.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons I really push private confession and absolution when things are fine. I kind of don't like Luther's verbiage there, that we should confess those sins which we know and feel in our hearts. I think we mishear that. What Luther means is we shouldn't make up sins. But it's often kind of interpreted as, if you know that you're forgiven and you know Jesus loves you, you're not doubting it, right? Well, then you don't need to go to confession. Confession is for, when you're really troubled. And the problem with that is, first of all, I don't think that's what it means. But the other problem is just what you're saying. When you come in a crisis, when you actually are in real trouble and you've done something really terrible or something really terrible has happened to you, if you're not in the habit of coming to confession, you're not going to.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to.
That corresponds to one of my chief pieces of parenting advice, and that is that the primary time for disciplining is exactly when you don't feel like it's necessary.
Yeah.
That's when you should spend most of the time disciplining your children.
That's right. Well, I was thinking when you were talking a minute ago, I was listening to somebody talk about parenting, and he was saying it's the real good is done in small moments consistently over time, not in special events, right? Not in the vacation, but these little things really add up. And so the kind of daily interaction, and I think, that's true of holy marriage too, right?
Yeah. I wonder if I heard the same thing, because it was a guy describing how he posed the question to his kids, what's your ideal day? And they answered, the ordinary things, making pancakes on Saturday morning. It's just like, what a wonderful thing. What a wonderful thing to know that like those ordinary moments that we are so, just like we're so quick to throw them away or imagine they don't count for anything. That's what's most valuable.
Or neglect them, right? Because we don't, right? I'll make it up later. So
yeah. Anything else from Luther that you want to draw out?
No, I thought it wasn't my favorite Luther sermon. No, that was it.
So we talked earlier about exegetical spaghetti, and as I was reading Luther, it felt almost trite to me for this to be a sermon about provision. I think he covers the topic well, but it feels almost trite to be a sermon about provision, given that the feeding of the 4,000, is coming two chapters on the heels of the feeding of the 5,000, and that so clearly when the gospel is recorded for us, there's more going on here, and maybe I would even say more fundamentally going on here than mere provision. I feel maybe bad saying it that way, but does that make sense?
Yeah, but what do you think's going on then?
Okay, so here would be my hypothesis. Before the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus has just commissioned his disciples to go out and perform works in his name by his authority. And those works include, for instance, casting out demons and cleansing the lepers. And so you get this kind of foreshadowing of the kind of work the church is going to do. And they are doing the things that Jesus does. And so then they're brought to the feeding of the 5,000. And it seems to me this kind of really simple test, have you picked up the fact that I'm commissioning you to do what I'm doing? So when they ask, where are we to get enough food to feed all of these people, they should know the answer, because they've been authorized to act on his behalf. And then he does it again, he commissions them in that moment to distribute the bread. So that's all taken place. And this to me seems like it's like primarily a training ground for the disciples. Are they learning that their task is to do what Jesus does, and what he does includes feeding? And so when they come to, post-ascension life in the church, what are they going to be doing? Feeding the church, feeding the people. So that, Mark 6 really kind of lays that out. And it's notable to me, this is the feeding of the 5,000 is the miracle that is in all of the Gospels. 4,000 is not, but it gives us this transition then to the Gentiles. And that seems to me to be the primary thing that's going on, is Jesus is teaching the disciples that their responsibility, the church's responsibility, is expansive in this way. And seeing as we're going to come to, like Peter making his good confession in Mark 8, and then subsequently being called Satan, and then the transfiguration, after which the disciples are not able to cast out a demon because they have not been praying. We kind of like discover this whole trajectory of discipleship where, like, on the one hand, Jesus is authorizing you to do these great and glorious things, and you're just fumbling at every turn because you forget the most basic things, that God's the one who's doing it, and you've been authorized on his behalf to do it, and it's your responsibility, but you have to do it, by means of prayer. That's a rambling kind of stream of consciousness picture of what I see there, but I think that is that progression of both discipleship as well as, apostleship, that seems to be really underlying the narrative, the larger narrative,
And that might be why Luther spends so much time on the ministry in that sermon.
Sure.
I think it's a good argument, and I think you can find real evidence for it even quicker in chapter 8, because when Jesus says, "Take heed of the leaven of the Pharisees," and then they say, "Oh, because we don't have any bread," right? There's that great moment. He says, "When I broke the 5 loaves, how many?" Right? So he demonstrates that he's showing them more, right, in this immediate context when he talks about it. When I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up? How is it you do not understand this? He says, right?
Yeah. And then he gives them this living parable with the blind man who begins to see by degrees. So his eyes are open and he doesn't see fully, which to me is kind of, Jesus teaches in so many ways. It's so plain that episode is for their sake. Do you get it now? I love that question. Do you not yet understand? And I'm always like, no, I've got the book and I still don't understand. I know. That's really in many ways the lesson, right? That this is what it is to live by faith, is that it is actually a struggle and it's not obvious. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think so. I have, this fits in perfectly with what I was thinking. And I noticed a line in the gospel that I've never paid attention to before. And of course, it's way better in Greek, and I guess it does have the way in English. But this is this thing where Jesus says that if he doesn't feed them, then they're gonna grow weary or faint in the way. Mm. And I thought, oh my goodness! I mean, of course there's a literal reality there, but he's actually talking about these are the people that have come to hear him. Right after he healed so he is coming. He was in. He'd gone through region Tyre and Sidon, and then the region of the Decapolis. Now he comes to the Sea of Galilee. So he's on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, Gentile territory, as we already said, and he heals the deaf man. Right, and then it's in response to those that they follow him. Right. So you've got these Gentile followers who have seen these miracles, and now they're hungry. And I think that when he says the way here, that he's actually talking about, Christianity. That you have to be fed by Jesus in the wilderness, or you're going to stop being a Christian. You're going to fall off the path, right? And I think, I don't know, I never thought of it that way before. I
read way there in that kind of eschatological way. I read it in the literal way as the road home.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I think that fits with what you're saying, that there's, this is more's going on here. And then I think you kind of get it that the way that they're going to be fed is through the apostles.
Right.
Another kind of fun thing, there's a couple of fun Gentiles things in this. One of them is that he has them, right, recline to eat. So that's, of course, that Roman, posture for eating that has to do with feasting. And they're not broken into groups. So in the feeding of the 5,000, they're broken into groups. And it sounds like Exodus 18, where Jethro gives the advice to break them into groups. And here you have this, just everybody reclining. There's an expansiveness to it, an inclusion and an expansiveness. And also, another thing what's fun with this compared to, and I picked this up from Veltz, I didn't know this, Jesus only uses this word Eucharisto. So in Mark 6, it's oilageo, right, to bless or to speak well of, right? It's barak in Hebrew. But here it's Eucharisto, and he only uses this word in the institution of the supper. Mark does. So I think he's definitely, so you get this big question, in a way, I think this is a dumb question, but right, is this Eucharistic? And I mean, it really just depends, of course, what you mean by that. But the answer is, of course, it is Eucharistic in the sense that this miracle informs our understanding of the Eucharist. And it isn't to say that these people were eating the body and blood of Jesus in this miracle, but it is to say that this miracle colors and teaches us something of what the Eucharist actually is, right? And that it is this kind of feeding on the way so that we don't faint. And it is this feast of thanksgiving, right? So, I mean, all of those things. And it's for Gentiles, which is maybe in some ways the most shocking thing of all.
Yeah. The Old Testament connection there is strong. So my friend Josh Reber pointed out to me that there are few birthday parties in the Bible. You have John the Baptist's death at King Herod's birthday party, which connects nicely to Pharaoh's birthday party, at which, whichever it is, the cupbearer or the baker loses his head, which then plays into Joseph, right? So what does Joseph do? He feeds his brothers and the world. And I'm thinking about how there's another contrast here between the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. In the 5,000, he doesn't say about them, they will faint on the way. Instead, what he says about them is they're like sheep without a shepherd, right. And he has compassion on them, right? And so it feels to me like this really vivid recapitulation of exactly that narrative. And to your point about it being Eucharistic, which I agree. I think it's the question is worthy of critique because eating is a fundamentally human thing, and eating the body and blood of Jesus is not like a superhuman thing. It is the fulfillment of this human thing. And so anytime you're dealing with eating, anytime the scriptures teach us about eating, they're teaching us something that is relevant to how we eat and drink the body and blood of Jesus. It's not like, because I think that in fact is probably the danger, is like separating sacramental eating from every other kind of eating as if they're two completely different things. They're not. Right. They're
right. And I think that what happens is we've reduced sacramental, the physical eating of the sacramental eating, we've reduced to a ceremony. That's the problem. As though this wasn't actually given to us to eat and to drink, or as though that was somehow arbitrary, like there's some other way we could get it. I don't know, intravenously or something. And it's the same thing with the elements. I always, the elements are not accident. Like Jesus is just what am I going to use? I need to institute a sacrament. What's handy? No, I think that actually the character of bread and what bread is as the staff of life, the food that comes from rocks, is actually essential to what Jesus gives in the sacrament in his body. And the same thing with wine. Right? That this isn't like, arbitrary liquid and solids. And you have a similar thing with holy baptism, that again, water is not arbitrary. And I think sometimes we mistakenly think it is, because we say, oh, well, what really matters is the word. Well, of course, but the word includes the elements, right? It's not as though there is no sacrament. Well, so in baptism, I always like to trick the children. It's just part of my mean nature. But I'll say, right, I'll say, is baptism water? And most of the time they'll say no, right? No, it's not bad. I'm like, no, it's not just plain water, but it is water, right? It is the water included in God's command. Baptism is water. There's no baptism without water. You can't do it, right? There is no Eucharist without bread and wine. I mean, that's the thing. That's why this, that we could just substitute something that reminds us of wine, something that's similar to wine, and it's just fine. That's a really terrible, unbiblical, and actually, I think, dangerous. You're testing God when you do that.
Yeah.
So, so I agree with you completely. The eating is not arbitrary. It's not a ceremony. I mean, it's a physical reality, but kneeling's a ceremony. Making the sign of the cross is a ceremony. Right. Having water put on you or eating and drinking the body and blood of Jesus are not ceremonies. And of course, the Lutheran kind of thing for this is that is actually the intended use, right? This was given to us to eat and to drink.
I think there's a connection there to the conversation we were having a moment ago about our like incapacity to slow down and drink a cup of coffee. Because in fact, we do this just with normal eating as well, unceremoniously, as though it is, right. And so in some sense, there is a kind of a modern problem there, right? The way that so if we reduce the sacrament in some ways to, the eating in the sacrament to mere ceremonies, we reduce the eating of our food to whatever the consumption, the intake of calories and macros. It is kind of there's a vanity and go ahead.
I was going to say, or pleasure. I think there's two extremes. Yeah. Either just, nutrients or just pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've often thought about how both the sacraments connect us all the way back to Genesis, the reversal of these curses, the one against the ground, that it wouldn't bear fruit, and the other against the womb, that it would be with pain in childbearing. And so you have in the sacrament of the altar the redemption of the ground. Here you have bread, and you go back even further. You've got the redemption of the dust, because it's flesh that you're eating. That's good. And then you also have the redemption of the womb. It's a better womb than crawling back into your mother's womb. It's the womb of the church, and that's why Jesus is not just. He's not just. And this is why Nicodemus doesn't understand him, because he's not just like speaking in allegory when he says you must be born again. He means it really. It actually has to happen.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I like that redeeming of the womb thing. I've thought about the redeeming of the land, and of course, lots of commentators have noticed that the fall comes by eating, and then redemption by eating, and that's right. But the womb things, that's very good. I like that. What was the other thing? You had something else in there. Anyway, that was all very good. I know. I forgot too. Sorry, I just said it, but thank you for that. Yeah.
So if you were, you're going to preach on this text, what are you going to make your one thought?
Well, I'm kind of right now. I like this thing that if you're not fed by Jesus, you're going to faint, and we want to stay on the way, right? And so I love that, but I don't know. It's a ways away.
Yeah, it's true. I think I was thinking about this on Sunday when I was teaching on Jeremiah 26, maybe 26 or 27. God blasts the false prophets. No, it was Psalm 115. They have hands, but they do not touch. Feet, but they do not move. And his concern about the false gods is not primarily that you're doing something wicked. That's there. But his concern is primarily that you're seeking for help where you will not find it. They cannot help you. They will not help you. And here he's the one who who sees you on the way and desires to help you. And that's where the folly of sin and unbelief is just on full display. You would be out of your mind to be in that crowd with Jesus and to pass on the bread. Like, no thanks. I'm going to be fine.
We didn't bring up the compassion word. He does use that, that in both accounts too.
Yeah.
That is significant that he has. Oh, and I don't like this translation. Jason never agrees with me on this, but I don't like this translation multitude. I think aklo has a negative connotation. I think it's that it's actually I would want to translate it almost like as a mob, a crowd with an unpredictable and slightly malicious character. This is Minnesota or Minneapolis during just before the George Floyd riots, right? This can turn on them. This is the organization that's, even though this is Gentiles, but this is the organization that's going to cry out, crucify.
Yeah. So here's your exegetical proof of that. Acts 17. The Jews are jealous, taking some wicked men of the rabble. That's the word there. It's aklo poi asantes. Aklo forming a mob. And they're doing exactly that thing. Yeah.
So I don't like multitude there. I think there is, he has compassion on those that are hostile to him. And even at the feeding of the 5,000, right, they seize him, or they try to seize him rather. And I think there is this, that's of course a huge part of it, his compassion is not returned with, it's not met with gratitude.
Yeah.
Or isn't, yeah. So that's fun also.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the numbers. The numbers are always fun as well.
Yeah, I was going to just ask you so somebody gloss those numbers. Somebody says to you, why is it 7 so many times over, and what's with 4,000?
Yeah, I think they're both Gentile numbers. So 5,000 for the Pentateuch, 4 for the 4 corners of the earth, right? The number of man is 4. And so I think 4,000 as opposed to 5,000 just has to do with, even though it's a smaller number, it's actually more expansive in that sense. And then same thing with 7. So the 7 days of creation really has to do with the fullness of creation, whereas 12 of the baskets is really, the 12 tribes of Israel. So even though both numbers are smaller, they're actually bigger, if that makes sense. Obviously we can't be completely dogmatic about that, but I think the basic symbolism of the numbers is pretty well accepted and reasonable.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the reflection of chapter 5 in Mark. This happens in Luke as well, but in chapter 5, you've got the Gerasene demoniac, followed by Jairus' daughter in the womb with a flow of blood. The second episode obviously features the number 12 prominently, but just before that, you've got the Gerasene demoniac, this Gentile miracle. I was just wondering if there's the number 7 in there at all. But in any case, this is the theme, right? He's going back and forth, and this is the point he's trying to get the disciples to understand when he asks them, "How many baskets did you have left over?"
Right?
Don't you get it?
Right. It's not arbitrary again, right? This is a setup, and that's why there is a deliberate symbolism in the numbers. Yeah, I think so. The other thing with that compassion thing is he has compassion on the sheep, right, in 6, and here it's compassion on the crowd. So again, that has to do with, I think that the contrast there is important. That the Israelites are the privileged people who had the word of God and should know, and they do have a kind of special affection from God, right? If you keep in Exodus 19, or 20, if you keep my commandments, right, and obey this, you will be, what's the word there? It's something like special people. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. I've chosen is what's in my head, but that doesn't.
That's probably something like chosen. I probably made up special. I can't even find it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either.
Sorry. All right, never mind.
If you will indeed obey my voice, here we go, 19:5, and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession.
That's it. There you go. Yeah, that was it. So anyway, that it is fun to see the two accounts kind of side by side. And I think it's appropriate, I think it would be inappropriate to read the feeding of the 4,000 without the feeding of the 5,000 in mind.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. In fact, I can hardly imagine doing it just as here's a feeding miracle, isn't this?
Yeah,
it would do it such an injustice, right?
Yeah. So good.
All right, very good. Any final comments?
No final comments.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.